These are some old roses I did. Boy, this was probably 20 years ago. And see how the watercolor, since we're working in
Mhm.
watercolor, water is our first ingredient, of course, right? So we want our roses to be loose and really nice and loose. This one was a rose that my husband, when we first met, he gave me a rose and I painted it because I always thought, well, roses die. They only stay that beautiful place for such a short time. So I thought I'd grab it and capture it. And I really thought that was a very loose, I wasn't thinking like, oh, I want to paint a painting. I just wanted to capture that rose for that moment. So this one, I just wanted to show you that example. And then these are the what we're going to do today. This is also just another loose rose from my memory, but we're going to do 3 different styles of roses today, kind of variations. So what you need to get started, of course, is you need water. I always like to have a couple of things of water, okay? Fresh, clean water, at least 2 things of water. Your paper, of course. Now, I'm going to use a larger sheet of paper to do some practice strokes. And if you have a piece of paper that you don't even care about, even some typing paper, that's okay. We're going to do some practice strokes before we paint on our watercolor papers. I've got here some 5x7 cold press watercolor and some greeting cards because I just feel like maybe these are watercolor greeting cards. I feel like maybe I want to do some watercolor roses just so I can have some greeting cards on hand. So have plenty of paper because you're going to be probably making at least 3 or more. The first thing, and don't let me go too fast. We also, if you have whatever brushes you have, I have a lot of brushes and I like to try different brush strokes with the different brushes. You do want to be a round brush, whatever size you have. It doesn't, don't worry about the size, but just if you have a variety of brushes, bring those out because you might be wanting to try them, and something to mix your colors in, and some colors, of course. And I have a variety of color, palettes that I'm going to use. I'm going to keep my colors in the rose colored range, maybe have some pinks and yellows. And there's a color I wanted to share with you that I love for roses, and it's called Opera. You can get Opera in different brands. It's a very, it's almost a fluorescent pink. It's supposed to be, it's not considered a light fast color, but I've had this color, this rose was painted with operas in that rose, and I've had this rose for since 2010, and I've had it exposed in air, and it's never faded. So I think that it's just not light fast when you're in the sun or in bright conditions. But it's a beautiful color. Just in any brand, if you can buy the color called Opera, you will just love it. So I'm going to just get started with our practice strokes. And this is a good thing to do before you start working on your beautiful watercolor paper that you love.
What size brush are you going to use, Karen?
I'm sorry, what was what?
What size brush do you think you'll use?
I'm going to use a number 8. Let's see,
Okay.
number 8 round. So I have a number 10 and a number 8. I'm going to probably just play with those.
Okay.
So any kind of brush that's round, of course. You're going to find when we do our practice strokes, try it with your different brushes because each brush is going to behave differently when you work with it. So first thing we do is we're going to mix up some colors. Let's just take a brush and get some water. I'm going to move these brushes out of the way so you can kind of see what I'm doing. There we go. And I'm just going to grab, I'm going to use this is the one I'm going to use is my practice sheet. Then I'm going to go on to my cards afterwards. I'm just going to mix up some colors, some flowery rose colors. I'm going to take my opera color, which is a really nice bright pink. I'm going to put a bunch of that opera in my dish. And I noticed this brush, it's called a Princeton. It's a number 8 round, and it's much more springy. It's got a lot of spring. And you'll just notice with each of your brushes, they always have a different personality. How many you get, just always work with them and try them out and practice on something, whether it be your piece of paper, just typing paper is fine. But if you have scrap watercolor paper or paper that you maybe didn't like the painting on, you just didn't like that painting, but you have some area that you can practice with, go ahead and use it. Or the backside, even though the backsides aren't always the best side. Sometimes they just don't respond as well. Get some colors that are in your rose. Let's get a palette and put together some rose colors. Like this is like, will be like a beautiful peach as we go along, I think. I'll just put this in here. Maybe do some reds, yellows, and pinks maybe would be really nice. And you don't really need to mix them. Just get a plenty amount of color in a palette, so you're not playing around with the little tin with trying to moisten the colors. It's better just to moisten them ahead of time and get those colors ready. So I'm going to try some little oranges, and then I'll also do some yellow. So I'm just going to mix this, show you what I'm doing here. And try this. This is a sienna. Maybe that's not a good idea. That's a pretty bright color. Now I'm going to try some yellow. Put some yellow in my little dish. I really kind of don't use yellow very often, and I need to go to it because it's such a nice, beautiful color. We'll do the greens later. We want to do the flowers first. We're going to concentrate on our flowers before we go to the greenery. But we will do some greenery too. I'm just kind of variety of rose colors. So would be these beautiful magentas, pinks, and then I'm going to use a darker color that I call, it's Rose of Ultramarine. It's interesting that they call it that. It's a Daniel Smith color. It is a purpley blue color, and I like it for making darken areas. So I've got a nice, I think I have a nice variety here. Maybe try a little more of this brand of opera and see what that looks like. Every brand is different. It has, that color. And then there's other colors I wanted to try. Let's see. Ooh, that's pretty. Okay. So I think I've got a variety of reds now and some yellow. And this is the time now we're going to make some practice strokes. When you're doing roses, mostly you're going to be making little strokes that are like curved kind of C's. They're like but you're going to take your brush, and I'm just going to show you. You load up your brush with a color. It's just a concentrated color. And what we're going to do, load it up really well with lots of water. And you're going to make a stroke, but you're going to take the tip of your brush and you're going to make a C, but you're going to start out light and then you're going to press down with the belly of the brush. So I'm going to start out light and then I'm going to press down and I'm going to lift up, and I've got this little C, kind of a curve. I want to do this a few times just to get the feel of that. So you're pressing and light, enter it in light, and then press down and lift as you go up. So light, pressure, press, and lift. This is going to be your petal stroke. So just kind of try that several times. And this gives you, then this will loosen you up big time for doing the rose. And just try different, let's just go across the page with making your little C strokes. And then we'll go in the opposite direction. You could try and just load up your brush and just see how that color moves around. Just do it several times, getting the feel. And maybe try light to really thick, and then, oops, there we go. Sometimes you have to double up. And then also, and I think another trick is to make sure you dip your brush each time you do a petal, because I wasn't dipping my brush and my petals were getting skinnier and skinnier. So let's go in the opposite direction. I'm going to just try some blue. And now I'm going to take my C, will be going backwards. So you can see, I'll just start with the tip of the brush and press down with the belly and then just lift up and make a C, kind of a C, stylized, kind of sort of a flat C. And you'll see it's different. It feels different when you're going in the opposite direction. This is good to just get the feeling until you get that shape that you want. Maybe rotate your wrist, however you want to do that. And just create your little C's going that way. So this is the biggest exercise I can share with you to get started and to loosen up before you start painting flowers. And then one other stroke I'm going to show you is to make a rosebud. These are so easy. We're just going to create they're like little U's. I'm just going to go like take my point of my brush and press and just kind of come back up. You can see it's kind of a little, I take the point, I press down, and then I just kind of flick it back up. So I've got, these can be like little rosebuds. You can just go like this and try just playing with that a little bit, okay? Just try several. It's almost like you can kind of see I'm just making these little, I start with a point, I press down, and I go right back up to that point. And then I can just kind of pull it out like that. Now do that, let's do that across the page, and then we'll start our real roses. At least we've got a feeling of what we want to do. I'm just pressing, I start out, do it again. Start out with the point, press down, and then just bring it back up to that point where you started, and then you can just kind of flare it out a little bit. That makes a nice little rosebud. We'll be using a combination of rosebuds and roses here. All right, so now that you've got that feel, you've kind of got this thing happening here. So now let's put them into a rose. I'm going to put that aside, and I'm going to bring over I'm going to bring over an art journal because I just feel like putting it in a journal, and then maybe I'll start doing some cards once I've got the practice. So this is a cotton, this is it's a watercolor journal. So it's just the same as like probably not, it's in between a cold press and a hot press. It's an interesting journal, but I thought I picked this up on Amazon. It's called Paul Rubens, and it does handle the watercolors really nicely. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a page of roses, and we'll start out. If you have just watercolor paper and you want to do one at a time, that's fine. So we're going to start out with our first rose, and I'm going to just kind of go. We do one. The first rose is we're going to take the darkest color. I'm going to have to load it up again. Here we go. We take our darkest color. So in this case, I'm going to be using my rose of ultramarine. But if you don't have a rose of ultramarine, you can take a pinkish red and a little bit of blue, just to add a little bit, and that will give you a nice, darker, rich red color. If you're planning to do a red one, or pink one. If you're doing a yellow one, you can start out with a really dark yellow or an orange to go in the center, and then make your colors as saturated as possible without being too dry. Make sure there's a lot, load up that brush, and I'm going to use the brush I've been practicing with, and then I'm going to try other brushes too. But the first thing we do is I'm going to start one right up here in this corner, and I've got to give myself room. But I'm going to start at the center. So just kind of decide where you're going to put your rose, and I'm just going to start right here, and I'm going to make some dots, kind of little, just some dots. Kind of a loose, wet dots. Okay, that's the center. And now we're going to take the same color and load it up again. And this time we're going to make a little C, a real small one. I'm going to start at the top. I'm just going to go around those dots, just tight, nice and tight though, because I don't want to make them big yet. So I'm going to make my little C here, and I want it to touch those dots. I don't want them to go, I want every beginning and ending, or at least an ending, to touch the last stroke. So I'm going to do my C again, and I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to go right next to this one. Hope you can see it good. Okay, I'm going to bring it over here, and I'm just going to have it touch. Okay, now I'm going to lift, I'm going to put some more color in, but this time I'm going to use maybe my bright pink color with a little bit, just make sure there's a lot of water. And now I'm going to do my little C, but this time I'm going to go in between the two little C shapes, the curved shapes. I'm going to go right from here to here. I'm just going to, and I want it not too far away from the last stroke. So I'm just going to start really with making that C, and I'm going to go around. And I want it to touch, I want it to end, so I'm going to touch it. I want it to touch, there we go, the last one. But I'm having it go out just a little bit. And we have to work fast, load it up again, and bring another C around, and have it touch the last one, because we want to have the colors blend together on the paper and keep it wet and loose. So now I'm lightening it up a little bit. I'm going to lighten it up about 50% or so. And now I'm going to go between these. I'm going to just I'll do it up here because it's already dry. Bringing it around, making the C. And as I go around the center, I'm going to lighten it and widen the petals. So I'm going to do the same thing here, making my C. And I'm just going to go, and then I want it to touch the last one, so it gives it that wet look. And then load up that brush with a little more water, and really probably just lighten it as you go around. And here I'm going to go this way, and I'm just going to vary it in different directions. And I'm going to get it even lighter. Remember, watercolor does lighten as you go. And I'm going to just do the same thing here. I'm going to touch, I want it to touch this petal, and then I'm bringing it around, and I'm just going to end it so that it kind of overlaps on the other petal. And then we'll just do that, and getting fatter and fatter. The petals are getting fatter and fatter. And the more you practice this isn't, it's these, and get them, make sure that they blend. Like, so as you can see, it's just kind of happening. And I'm going to go really pale now. I'm going to just go ahead and put mostly water and a little bit of color. And I'm just going to go loose and kind of finish those off and really be spontaneous. That one was too dry. And much paler. And now I kind of, there we go. And when you're finished, you just feel you go, okay, that's finished. So I'm going to leave that for now. We can come back to these, and we can make more details later. But there's our first style. So that's going to let that dry, and then we'll come back to it. The second one, the second style, we're going to do, maybe let's just for fun before we leave this little spot, I'm going to make a little rosebud kind of up here. And remember the rosebuds, they were like a little point and a little, just bring it up and just do this. Like that. And you can even bring a second one like this. And what I would do with a rosebud is make it darker at the bottom. So just drop in a little one of your darker colors down at the bottom, and just leave it like that. We'll put some greenery later. Maybe a second bud. Let's just do a second one. So remember how you just go like, you take your point and squish it down and then bring it up. And now I'll put some darker color at the bottom, just to give it, while it's still wet. Of course, keeping lots of water will make these just really stand out and look much more loose. So I'm going to let those sit. Now on our second rose, I'm going to make one right here, right next to this one. And this one's a little different. It's not that much different. In fact, all these are kind of similar. I'm going to I've got some more paint I need to add here. This one, I think I'm going to go yellow, because I need to just change the colors. So I'm going to start with an orange center. Maybe mix it with a little purple, because I want to avoid it getting it brown, but it looks still pretty orange. So I'm going to go with the center. So this time you're going to make tiny little, and we're going to just take our little brush and do the little miniature C's, very small. I'm going to start at the center where I want my center to be. I'm just going to make a little curve here and a little curve there. That's it. So just starting with that. And now I've got plenty of color on my brush, so I'm going to continue. I'm going to make another curve, C curve, and another one, just having them touch each other. And now I'm going to just go out a little bit with a little lighter color. And this time I don't want it smack dab in the center, so I'm going to start to bring my petals down, and this will be the top. So I'm just going to go with the curved, go a little bit lighter, and just kind of alternate. And I'll bring in some yellow, and then just kind of go around with your little curves. And now you can see, you get wider as you go out and lighter. Load up your brushes with water and go wide, even just go as wider than you think, and then have so that those petals, and the way you do that is you start with a point, and then you just kind of smush down your brush, and you bring that you bring that shape back. So this one probably went out a little far, but that's okay. I can play with that. Bring some petals around and just kind of curving those around. Now, so I've got that one. I'm just going to add a little bit of, I'm noticing this paper is drying really fast. So if that happens to you, you'll notice papers are just going to be different. So here's another style, and I'm going to add a little up here. I think it needs a little more. So I'm going to just go ahead and put another petal up at the top and then another one around like that. And just until it feels right. There we go, like that. I'm going to leave that alone, and maybe I'll just leave that one alone for now. Okay, so making a third one. A third type. Now, they're very similar to this, but we're going to take a darker color like your purple-y color, something kind of dark. There we go. That's a nice deep color. Going back to my pinks, but I would love to just switch it up again, but I still love these. I love purple and pink. So now I'm going to make like little squiggly lines in the middle here. So take a small, like using the tip of my brush, and I'm just making little squigglies. You can see they kind of look, and I'm going to make this one a really larger rose. So I'm going to make my squigglies. You can see there we are. Just going to let that, and I can go dark. Let's go dark. I'm just going to pop some dark color in there just to really let it be nice and dark. Now I'm going to try a different brush because this brush is one way, and I'm going to try this big number 10. This is a 10. It's a different type of brush. It's a lot softer. It's a squirrel hair, so it's a Da Vinci. I love these brushes. If you have a chance, these are made in Germany, and they are incredible brushes. So right now, as you can see, your water could be turning a certain color because I'm using colors in the same family. Then this is good to have one water container be your flower container, and then maybe the other one could be your greenery container. So now I'm going to take some color. There we go. I'm just take that nice red. And I'm loading up my brush. Now, I don't know how this brush is going to behave, but maybe this is a good thing. It's holding a lot of color. You can see it just about sucked up all of this color in this tray. So I don't know if I'll be able to go use it several times, but now I'm going to start with a point, and then I'm going to press down. Oh yeah, it's going to be a lot looser. And making that C, and I'm going to have it touch the inside so that the inside will bleed out a little bit. There we go. So I can, and then just bring, maybe like that. Okay, so now that color is moving outward, but I'm leaving some areas of white here and there. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm going to grab, this is going to take all my color. It's kind of funny. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing. This is a different brush, so it's okay. These are more controlled on this side, and this is going to be a lot less control. So I'm going to start my C right at the top here, and I'm going to bring it, and I'm going to just move it to the side. There's another one. Got a little interesting with a little opera. I think I'll add a little orange. I'm just going to pop a little orange right at the ends just to kind of see what happens. See, if I use it while it's still wet, if I put it in there while it's wet, it's going to migrate and dance throughout the page. And I'm going to do the same thing. This one's going to be a really wet rose, but it's going to be fun. All right, so I'm going to take my C, and I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to go right to this, and I want it to touch. I'm going to have it touch this one so that it bleeds into it. We do the same. I'm going to drop some color. There we are. Okay. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to do another C. Kind of start it, kind of like a little bit, just kind of go around randomly and just kind of watch that. Just see how these work. Like, there we go, like this. And I'm just going to bring those petals around, and I have that so far away, so I'm going to bring that a little closer. And then I'm going to change the size of those little C's too. If you change the size, you will get a variation in petals. Of course, I'm not looking at a rose right now, but if you look at them long enough, you'll remember kind of what you need to do. So I'm going to go around here. I'm going to see where this shape needs to happen. Here we are, like that, and then just let some of the colors touch. And this one, I think I'm gonna, it's so loose, and I kind of like that, it's fun. Now my center is off center, which is what I was looking for. And now we can leave that like that, or I could add maybe another petal over here to just give it some symmetry maybe. And build it as you can make it as large or small as you want. Build your petals out and make them thicker and wider as you go. Here we go, I'm just gonna go a little wider there. And lighter, because that's what happens with roses. They tend to, as the petals thin out, they'll get much lighter looking. And this one's a big one, going to be a giant rose. It's going to be bigger than life. Just play with these. There, I think that one more, I'm going to go, this brush is much less control, which is kind of good. All right, I think I've gotten enough on that one. So again, I'm going to try making a rosebud with this one, just to see. I'm going to do start it with the top, press down and flick it back up. And yeah, that works. And then you can put your color, or you can add yellow. You can just play. Now that we've got our roses, we've got 3 styles of roses so far. And I think I want to make a rosebud for this one here too. So I'm just going to make a little, there we are, kind of a little rosebud, maybe 2 right there off of that one. So you've got like a teardrop shape going with those. Maybe this one, it needs a second one. Right, if you're doing a large piece of paper like this one here, and see where I have got this red, I'm going to go ahead and make a rosebud there, because I'm going to turn my paper around a little bit. I'm just going to do it this way. See, when you have an accident, you just go ahead and turn it into like you just did it on purpose. So we're going to let that sit for a bit. Now we need these to dry. These look pretty dry on this side to be able to start the greenery. I'm going to just do one on a card just to do it. And if you have a card, I'm just going to set that aside. We need to let those petals dry just a little before we do our next layer. So I'm going to set that aside and do one on a card. And the way I think would be fun to do on a card is I have it opened. It's one of those greeting cards that, that folds. But I'm going to just kind of have it, I think I want to go big, and I'm going to do it this way since I've already gotten used to this one. I'm going to grab some color and put some of this purpley, some of the rose of ultramarine in the center. I'll move this over here. Okay. And load up. I've used up a lot of paint just for that little bit, those little roses. There's the color I'm looking for. Can add some opera to that, which will give it that nice, yummy pink tone. And I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to make dots. I'm going to go back to my first one. And I don't want to put it in this smack dab in the center. I don't know if just try to make it go off somewhere. So like here, I'll just do it right here. I'll start my little dots. Make a very nice concentrated dots right in the center. And they could vary in size like that, and make them nice and wet, because that's going to go into your petals as you go around. I could try a different brush, but I'm going to just play with this one. This one needs to have a little practice because I'm not used to this one. I think it's probably good for bigger paintings. It is pretty big. But this is the time to play, because you're just playing, you're practicing, you're just trying something out. So now I'm going to mix up a little bit more of these colors here. And I'm going to go ahead and start my rose. I'll start with a little C shape with a point and kind of tightly go around those little dots. And I'm going to bring my second, there's so much water in this. If you have a brush that's drier, you may need to reload it, but this one is really super dry, super wet. So I'm going to take my second one and bring it really tight. And then my third one, make it dark as well. I'm going to bring that one just like right to there, like this. So we've got 3 little C's that are kind of going in, and now the dots are kind of blending. And now I'm just going to start going a little bit lighter as I go out. Now this time I'm going to use that opera pink. And load it up. And this time I'm just going to go making larger C's, and I want them to touch. And if yours isn't turning into a point, you can always just kind of fake it here, like the way I'm doing here, and just sort of bringing it around. So it kind of hugs the center that you created. And I'm going to do the same with, I'm going to bring this here, right? I think I'm going to start it right at this place here. And just bring it around like that and have it touch. Always try to get it to touch the last place you painted so that the colors will blend together nice. They'll play nice together. Trying a new color here. Ooh, some red. And then I'm going to just do the same thing. And while it's still wet, now, if you have dry areas, you won't be able to do that. So if it's a wet area, that's where you want to have them touch. There we go. And I'm going to go a little wider and bolder here. Like that. And do the same. And here's a little wet place here I could see. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to have it touch and then bring it around. And I'm going to have it end by touching this one. Okay. So if it's dry, you can just start it in a way, just don't let it touch. Like this little part here, I didn't touch. So go lighter, take a little, try to get lighter as you go out. And then I'll do the same thing here. I'm going to bring, this is dry, but this is wet over here. So you can rotate your paper too. If you want to just, if you rotate it though, you'll kind of you might lose sight, but let's see what happens. I'm going to rotate it and I see the wet area right there. There's a little wet area. So I'm going to start it right there and I'm going to bring it around and then just, there, it's lighter, it's a much lighter color. And I like that light petal color. We'll do the same thing here. I'm going to bring this one while it's still wet and bring it around. And just kind of go fast. I'm going a little slow just to show you, but I think the faster you go, the more beautiful they will be. I'm going to mix this up a little bit with a darker one. Not too dark, but go light and wide as you go out. And just keep doing that. Now, if it's really there, just if you find that there's an area that's dry, you just might have to re-wet that area. This is going to be a big, bold rose. It's like bigger than life. And there we are. And then just going to let that sit. And I think I want it to go to the opposite side or the other side of the card. I'm just going to let that sit. That is a huge rose. Here, I'm just going to make that petal even larger. If you work with while it's still wet, you're okay. Now we can come back to this one later too. I'm going to make a rosebud, just like I did with the other one. I'm going to do a little rosebud coming out over here. So I'm going to take it, make my little point, and then I'm going to go snap it back. This one I'm going to make a little bigger. There we are, like that. And then just drop a little of that same dark color, the rose, the ultramarine rose, and let that sit. And I'm just going to let that sit, let that dry. Now we can come back. Now we can go to do our greenery. So we're going to practice some greenery too. All right, so we're switching from floral. Well, maybe not. We'll probably come back. We're going to do some detailing. If your roses look like they need a little detail, like these, if I want to, I can take my brush, this one here, the number 8, smaller brush would probably be good if you have a smaller one. You take the same color, you're going to glaze over, you may be glazing over to just create detail. You're not going to go really dark, but you're going to take the same color and maybe just a tad darker than what you have in here, but just glazing in itself with the same color will create a deeper, denser color because you're just layering. Of course, it's going to look darker. So kind of mix up some color for the glaze, as we call it. And now I've got like a medium, very kind of a medium tone pink color, and I could mix anything up. But if I wanted to get some shadows, like here, you can see if you look at the petals here all over the place, they could use some dimension. So what I'm going to do is start in the center, and I'm going to go right in the inside of the petal where my C was, and I'm going to make a smaller C than what I started with. And I'm going to glaze. I'm going to go a little, probably a little darker. It's just not doing it here. So make a little, like a little smaller curve C inside, so that you're not covering the whole thing, but you're just kind of shading it a little bit. You're creating a deeper, on the inside of the petal. So you're creating a little deeper kind of a shadow or shading, a little more depth. I'm going to do the same thing I'm just going to follow the line, the shape of my little C's. And go, and I can do the same thing. Let them touch each other so that they can blend with each other. And you can always add, if you feel like you want it to make a little darker, a little more dense, just drop in the color while it's still wet. So look, make sure that your paper is still wet when that happens. And then you'll get a nice, deeper, blended color rather than it looking really dry. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to follow the little petals as I go outward here this way, and then make them don't want to cover the whole one, the first set, but you're just creating depth and low lights here. And we're not going to be using white because white, your paper is white, so you don't need to add white. And then same thing here, this little one needs a little bit of shadow, so I'm just going to bring that, just cover part of this petal. And I'm going to go nice and wet, and then I'm going to do the same thing here. Wherever you have, and you see that you'll need some shadows, then go right ahead and make your little C curves, but smaller on each petal. That gives you more detail for your roses and depth without really having to labor over it. So I'm just going to go through all of them. So there it is. So you can see how it gave it a little bit more depth. I can also do that more detail in the inside. Just a little bit more. I think maybe right in here. This needs a little bit darker, I think. And just kind of, there we go. So that kind of tightens it up a little bit. You can do the same with your others. Let's see. Going over to this one, I'll do the same since I've already got the paint loaded. And then we'll go to our leaves. Okay, so just you could see, I'm just creating little glazes. You can go as bold or as delicate as you want, but do the same process where you have it darker in the middle and much softer going outwards in color. Just little touches like that will really make a difference. Here I'll just do a little bit of lines. And you don't have to do all of them. If you like the rose the way it was the first way, you can do that too. You don't need to go in back and do glazes like that. But it does help it does give it some more depth. And you can even do that a third time. If it works for you, do it a third time, that's fine. Same thing here, I'm going to do the same thing with these. Like just following the strokes that I did before. Not covering them completely, but just kind of going around. So now we can do this with our little rosebuds. But since my rosebuds are still wet, this one is not dry. It's not ready for me to glaze, but I could. Just do this one for a second. And then what we'll do, we've got plenty of time. Oh, we just have to do the greenery now. So I'll just do this one later, but you can kind of see how we just create that detail like that. So greenery, let's go move on to that. So really quickly on your practice paper, let's see if I can grab my okay, back to the practice paper, because you don't want to do it on your beautiful rose painting yet. So you take your practice paper and using the brush that you want to use, whatever it is. I'm going to go ahead and try to use this one. I'm going to try to make leaves and twigs. And now you need to mix up some greens. So you put away your rose colors, and now you're just going to try to get greens. And I think I have a bigger palette over here. I'll just grab that. A little bit more mixing area. Keep leaving my rose colors alone, because you'll come back to those probably. Okay, so mix up some greens. I love this color called Cascade green that Daniel Smith makes. Oh my gosh, it's a beautiful green. They have several greens that are just amazing. There's a green.
You're killing me. I pulled out the same color right before you said it.
Did you pull out your Cascade green?
I did.
Oh, fantastic. Now that green has got a, if you compare it next to, let's say, green apatite or any yellow greens, it's such a blue, it's almost blue, but it's really beautiful for the rose petals and the rose twigs, because that's, if you know that rose leaves are kind of a cool, they're on the cool side. So now to make your, let's start for practice, just make some lines. Just see how fine you can get lines with your brush. This brush isn't really letting me really get a thin line, but it's thin enough. But just take your green and just practice some lines, just straight like that. Now the next, load up your brush with your green and take your brush and start with a point with the tip, and then with a fully loaded brush, make sure it's got lots of color in it. Start with your tip and then press down and then lift up, and you can make a leaf. If it doesn't make the leaf the first time, you can always reshape it while it's still wet, of course. You can reshape that and make a rose kind of leaf. Now, rose leaves, as I remember, are kind of on the rounded side with a nice point to the end. So make a couple of those so that you kind of feel, there we are, like that. So you just kind of work with your brush. Now this brush, I'm going to switch out because I'm not digging the way it's making a leaf. Now I just noticed I did a big splotch on my rose on this paper over here, and I'm going to leave it there because I kind of think it's cool. I'm going to try a different brush. Let's see. I'm going to try one that's a little softer, because that one had a lot of bounce to it. This one is, and I'm going to change my water from the rose water to just some clear water without anything in it. I also have this little, I just got this yesterday. It's an all-purpose brush. It's a Chinese brush. Oh boy, does it make some fine lines. And it's not expensive at all. I'll kind of show you what I mean. But it doesn't make great leaves because it's too fine. But if you want to get some fine lines, boy, you can get them with this. So just going to practice. And these are so cheap, and some of the hairs come out when you first buy them. That's normal even for expensive brushes. You always just don't worry about that. If a hair comes out, just pull it out gently. Sheds just like little, pets do and people do. So just see how thin my lines can be with this. It's like, wow, I can get like thin grass. So I would do this for lines, but I'm not going to do it today, because if I try to make the press down and try to make a leaf, it just doesn't hold its shape for that. But it does for lines, so it's pretty cool. So that's the thing about trying things with your brushes, and on a practice piece of practice paper first, because you don't want to do it on your roses, because you're going to have beautiful paintings of roses. So now I'm going to take this brush. I'm going to start out light, and then I'm going to press down. And I like the way this one holds the water and holds the color, and I'm able to make a leaf. So practice a couple leaves. And it's your style. Whatever style leaf you make is you. It's okay. You don't have to make them exactly like I do, but just make some leaves and kind of get yourself familiar with those. Play with that on your thing. And now that we have these little rose beds that we practice, try making little rosebud leaves. Trying to think of how those would look. Kind of like, it would sort of look like this. Okay, so see, try those on your little practice rosebuds. You'll just try it. Make little small leaves and then a branch coming down. This is a wonderful way to just get it ready for your full painting. I try to do this with all my paintings. See, I've got little parts coming out. You do this with all your paintings, and let me tell you, your paintings will just be much looser, because you've already kind of loosened up. You loosen up on your practice paper, and then you can be more confident on your sheet of paper as you go. Always when you're think about your water and your pigment and work, always try to put new color in while the old color is still wet, while the first layer is still wet. Kind of bring out the shape. So try that on your rose buds. so you get an idea of how that, feels. And now, and do that, that's always a great way. So just put your practice paper away. And now I've got my set here that I started. And you see I had a little splotch here, and it's still a big splotch. It's still not wet, or still not dry. I'm going to go ahead and blot it because it's never going to get dry. But sometimes splatters really make it even better. Just splattering while it's still wet and just letting it happen. I think that would be fun too. So I'm going to start by making my little green. I'm mixing up some green, kind of a combination of that Cascade green, mixing. It's a very blue green, you can see. I'm going to mix this color called a green apatite, which is a very grainy green. I love it. It kind of sort of yellowy green with these brown flecks in it. I'm going to put that next to it. So I've got a couple of greens, and then I'm going to use a little purple too to make it a little dark. Your flowers and your greenery should always be other colors, not just one color, and that always makes it more interesting with your watercolor. So I'm going to start. Let's say I'll start with this one because it's dry, and I'm going to make my little cute little rose, my petal leaves, and I'm going to start with a little fine, just a little fine, and I'll just drop it down. Same thing here. I'm going to start fine, and I'm just going to go thick. I'm just going to let it kind of, there we are, like that. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side, and maybe just bring it up a little. So while it's still wet, I want to just bring a branch that kind of comes out. Here we are, just like this. So it's coming out of the rose, but I'm not going to have it go past the rose. I'm going to do the same thing with this petal, or not petal, the rosebud. This needs to be a little darker. So while it's still wet, you can work it. And now, same thing here. I'm going to load up my brush, make a little pointy part, and then I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm thinking, if I think too much, sometimes I can kind of get too tight, and that's very common. So don't, especially when you're, if you've not worked with watercolors a lot, it's common to be worried about how it's going to look. So just play with this. Don't worry about the outcome. Now I'm going to just bring this down, and now I'm going to make a branch or a stem, and I'm going to bring it into that rose, but I'm going to stop right at that rose. And I don't want my branch too thick, but so there I've got that. Okay, so we've got a couple of these going. And now I'm going to make some leaves, some serious leaves. Mixing my greens, and I'm going to do, I think I'm just going to make a leaf that kind of comes out. I don't want it to touch the rose yet. I don't think it actually, the way roses are, they really don't touch the flower. You get this like here, lots of leaf supporting the bud, and then there's a nice thick branches, with thorns on it usually, and then leaves are kind of outside. So they're usually at the bottom. So I'm just going to make a leaf right here. I'll start a leaf, and there. It's okay if it touches the other one. Here's one, and while it's still wet, I want to add. Just want to make it happen here. Just add some depth like this would. There we are. And I'm not really making the stem yet. I'm just going to make the leaf shape. I think I went a little dark. Now, if you notice too, roses have that little serrated edge. You might want to take like the points. See, I just made like a little sharp edge going through the wet watercolor. Sort of like that. It's a little bit not working, but there, I can tighten that up just a little bit. And I might be overthinking this one. So I'm just going to let it be. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to take this leaf. Now that I have that leaf, and I can always go darker. And if you find that you've gone too dark, like that was probably too intense, I'm going to take a brush, I wet it, I get it wet, I dry it off, and then I can siphon while it's still wet, of course only. I can siphon the color up if it's just too much. Yeah, because that was way too much. It's probably better to have delicate, start light. I kind of went a little crazy. So you can actually go back into your leaf and wet it completely. if you give it nice and keep it wet, it's always good when you're keeping it wet. And then now I've got a dry, I've got it ready to siphon some color up, and I'm just gently going over that. And I'm able to lift this color while it's still wet. Now it's much better because it was just too light. So that's what you can do. You can always fix watercolor while it's still wet. You can fix it. Now I've got a much better color, and I can add color later. This brush again is a little different than what I'm used to using, so use a brush that you're familiar with. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to bring a stem. While it's still wet, I'm going to kind of create a stem, and I'll probably have it go this like all the way through under the rose petal, of course, and through. And I'm going to do the same thing when I make another leaf, and this time I'm not going to be so tight because that one's not really that nice. So I'm going to just bring it and I'm just going to do it. Nice and wet, I'm even scrubbing right over it. I don't want to be overly tight, which I was with that one. So I'm going to loosen it up. There we go, like that. Just going to kind of erase what I did before. So you can always do that. There's that. Now mix up some more green, and let's do another green somewhere else, maybe, here. It's kind of coming out of this. And just if you start light, and then you can always go darker later. This one needs to be bigger. And sometimes, like in this one, I just wasn't happy with this leaf at all. There we go. It might look better once I do a glaze over it, because I'm going to just let that be like that for now. So do that with just kind of put some leaves around and stems. Same thing with these. Your other ones, just make your little, and don't go too, you don't need to, there we go, like that. I think the slower you go, you just got to go spontaneous and fast. That's probably my best advice on that one, because I was overthinking this one here. But it'll be all right. I'll fix it. This is now 2 leaves. It will be 2 leaves, and I'm going to bring a branch maybe around here, coming from here, so that will look a little more natural, like it's supposed to. And then I'll deal with that later. But you can see we've got some leaves going, and there we go, just another one here. Just to bring some balance and green to your roses. And really you're not going to overpower them with green, but you're just creating a nice little composition. There we go, like this, maybe bring that. And rose stems can curve, so it's okay to have a little curve in your lines or your strokes. Here, I'll put a little green here. But you don't want them to really touch the rose because, like I said, they don't really touch in real life, down so close to it. Unlike actually most flowers, I think, are all kind of like that. So this one will have more of a bend, like this might come from a vine. And then you can just add, oops, I don't know if I was showing you that. There we go. So here we've got, so this is a start. It's not finished, but it is noon. But so I'll go a little bit more. To detail, of course, you can always glaze. So like this one here, this leaf here, I'm going to add some green. That hour went fast. So hopefully, I want to be able to share, everybody share. So I'm just going to do one little thing here to show you. If I put lines through the leaves to give detail, and I do this when this is dry, of course. I'm going to go and just make a nice deep line in the center, and just you can create little veins on your leaves. You can draw with your brush. Of course, this brush is not doing the lines that I want, so I'm going to stop doing that. You can just, there we go, that's just to make a darker color here. And now what I'll do with this mess here, because that's a mess, this little spot here, I will rescue it once it's dry. I'm going to have to dab it. You can even lift it off, and I'm going to just play with that in a little bit. And then I'll show you, I'll send you, or I'll post the solution But what it is I'll let this dry, and then I'm going to just take this one and make, or this one behind it, I think I'll make darker. It's not quite dry enough. Let's see. It's going to take that Cascade green and go a little darker, not too much darker, because I can always layer. And I'm just going to go behind it if it'll let me. Yep, it will. I'm just going to go a little darker just to give that, so that it looks like two leaves, one on top of the other. And then I can just play in detail later. There, so you can kind of see I just made that lift a little bit. And that's that one. Let that sit, and I'll just keep working this. We can add splatters. You can add, here, this one I can go a little darker on this here. Now I really like to see what everybody else has done, so I'm going to just.
Can I see the rest of your page on the left?
Yes, this one?
If you don't mind. Thank you.
Still working on it. But
that's okay, so am I.
Yeah, and so what I might do is do a little leaf in this section maybe, and just, or I can splatter.
Yeah.
You know, it's all like here. I've got a little page I'll show you here, just how simple, just by adding a little bit of flower, a little greenery here. This one is just a little bit more. Whoop. You can see this one has a little bit more, but the leaves aren't touching. They're just kind of kissing the rose. They're not touching it. So that's kind of how I would go there. And then this one, I think it's going to be really fun when the card's done. I'll do green around it. And then that, when I fold it, see the off balance? Instead of it being smack dab in the middle of my paper, having it off balance makes it more interesting as a composition. So I'd love to see what everybody's done. So